Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Scavengers Reign, Season 1. This is the first season, or a season, of an animated show that has been on Max. And I, at first, saw the visuals, saw the trailers, thought all of that looked really cool, and was thinking, like, oh, this could be neat. And as I started watching it, the more invested I got. And before I go into all the various other critical things I can talk about with this show, one of the things about this show that is unique for me is I am not a big binge watcher in terms of like a show. Like, I don't really like to do that with one show. I get bored, like, pretty much with all of them. Like, I'll watch two, and then by the second one, I'm like, I need a break from this show. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, if I watch movies, I watch different things in a row. That's just how I am. But Scavengers Reign, I could watch like 3 in a row, and each one was different. The alien creatures would be different. There'd be surprises around the corner. There'd be different creatures I didn't expect. There'd be things like, I was like, I could not see where that was going. Maybe I sort of would think a concept maybe would come up, but they would go in a different way. It's probably like the only show to make me break from my sort of anti-binge watching thing, because it was so different and surprising. And I loved this show so much, it was so good, it made me break from that and actually want to binge the show. I wanted to get more into it because it was like so addicting, because it was so fucking good. It was so surprising in its animation. It was so arresting in what's going on with its characters. I never knew what to expect coming up. It was a wholly different, surprising show. And like, as just a simple, like, as a viewer, this isn't me going like, science fiction is not like this anymore, and I'm sure I'll say that in 5 minutes, but like, in for real, like, just watching it as a basic viewer, I was always surprised and taken in, and like never really expected what would happen next. There was always a whole new concept that would take my breath away. It just, on just a very basic, like, viewer level of the immediate experience of this show, was so much and so rich. I was really surprised at how fucking good this thing was. It's probably some of the best TV, if not the best. It was some of the best animated TV I've seen in a long time. It's some of the best animated TV of our current era, but it's also probably some of the best television of our current era, or streaming era, or whatever this is. It's just absolutely one of the great things to experience at this time. So Scavengers Reign is about a ship called the Demeter, which is an obvious, Dracula reference, and I sort of wish it had worked out where there wasn't a movie called the Demeter for this show, but whatever. But it's like pretty famous, so like, regardless of Dracula on a boat, I would have gotten that reference. But the ship called the Demeter basically crashes. We're not 100% sure, but we're fairly certain its solar flares hits the ship that is going to give supplies to, I believe, a new colony or something. The ship has an accident. People leave the ship in escape pods, and they go down to this planet, and this planet has all sorts of plant life and creatures on it, and you have three different plot lines. You have Ursula and Sam, who are trying to survive together. You have a Cayman, who's largely responsible, I think, for the ship crashing in the first place. Then you have Levi, kind of helper robot, and AZ. And you kind of see their different experiences. You see some flashbacks, and you kind of go through as they try to find their way back to the Demeter, which they at some point bring back to the planet they're on, and hope to eventually send a distress call to get back off the planet. Now, this reminded me a lot of Mobius and Mobius's animation, and it reminded me a lot of the other kind of great French and European comics artists that the Heavy Metal magazine, which it was already existing in France. Heavy Metal magazine was sort of used as a way to distribute that to America, or at least in its beginnings. It obviously became something else, and blah blah, or Kaza or something. Like, so many different great artists that this, but mostly Mobius, that this reminded me of in the great way. A lot of those things would tackle larger, crazier themes that I think the complexity of sci-fi that I think science fiction used to more represent pre Star Wars. I don't think it was necessarily Star Wars' fault, but it probably is science fiction of thoughts and ideas and meditation, and there's more drugs than, or more people doing drugs writing about sci-fi. And it's interesting to see that come back in such a way, but also even hearing interviews with the creators of this show, Joseph Bennett and Charles Huther, I believe, it seems like they're much more interested in science and the idea of plants and what plants can do, and the idea of so many different larger, both philosophical ideas, but it's a philosophical kind of moral ideas that you come up with through wildlife, through plants, through existing in the wild and things like that. It made this such an interesting idea, and I think something that those old heavy metal comics dealt with. But I also think, often when we talk about modern science fiction, it feels like it's always calling back to other science fiction films and, like Star Wars or Alien or something like that. And they actually brought up they didn't even watch Alien, which was surprising to be honest with this kind of science fiction. They talked about more like Jurassic Park, and they talked about Last of the Mohicans and the Revenant and surviving in the wilderness and stuff. And this is like people surviving in the elements, but the elements are crazy and weird, and you don't know what to expect and what's going to come around the corner. Like, that is one thing I really love about this show, is the imagination behind it is so rich. Like, I really did not know what to expect, and there'd be a thing that I'd be thinking about all day, like this creature who like opens up this plant and like does this little thing, and Ursula sees it, and it's like this incredibly moving experience, and it completely came through in the animation. I know they've talked about in interviews, like they thought of the animators as actors, because as much as there is dialogue in the show, the original short Scavengers did not have any dialogue, and this does have dialogue, but I think a lot of the storytelling is done without dialogue as well. It has a very rich kind of view of the people in it. I think Cayman is probably one of the most interesting characters, because as much as I think he's the biggest piece of shit I can imagine, there's also an insanely surprising and moving scene that I often find, and maybe this is just me personally, and I don't know if this is everyone, and it doesn't have to be, or I don't know what this says or whatever, but if I see someone make a mistake in a movie and they have to deal with that mistake, like a major mistake, not like a oopsie, I dropped a thingy, like a major mistake, and it reminded me of, there's a part, and if you've seen it, you know the part where he knows he majorly fucked something. Like I look at it as an accident, but it's still an accident that that's like, it's absolutely devastating. And even though this is a different context and a different scene, when the mayor from Jaws has to admit to Brody that his kids were out there too, and he messed up. Like, he sent his kids out there and knew there were sharks in the water, and he did a horrible thing. And I don't think I've ever fucked up that bad in my life, but it just says a lot about you as a person if you're able to recognize your own mistakes at such an extreme level, because I think that's something that you'd not want to dwell in as a person. And Cayman, in a sense, most of his character, he can't deal with it, and what most people do, which is probably drug addiction. And I think like this shows a form of that in this. I'm talking very loosely, but that is an insanely sad and beautiful and depressing arc of a person that just Jesus, I'm still a little wrecked from that. Same with the plot of Levi, who is a helper robot who gets infected by, I don't want to say infected, but gets joined by the kind of plant life of the planet and starts becoming more sentient because of the plant life within Levi, and saying all these lines. Like, I think there's a part where Levi says, like, if you turn me off, I would just stop being, and I don't like that. I don't like to not feel things. And it's like yeah, you wouldn't like to like suddenly not be alive for a little bit. And God, the moral ideas that this brings up, but like I like that like it does it both in a very moral kind of like Star Trek-y kind of very science way, but mixes it with the very real visceral physicality of kind of non-dialogue visual storytelling, and a very intensely beautiful show. Like it's very hard for me not to tell everyone in the world. I think this show, I mean, I guess I have promoted, I made a short and I've tried to tell people and all those things, but it's sad to me if this doesn't go on and get another season, because there's some real genius in this, and I think we sometimes let our more genius animated storytellers fall by the wayside because people are not willing to go into these worlds. But like some of the greatest science fiction storytelling I've seen in a long time, like some of the, like, I love sci-fi as a kid, and it becomes like such a different thing as I've gotten older and hearing people talk about it, and it doesn't feel surprising, but this made me love that genre like I used to when I was 12, but on a so much more philosophically interesting level. Like I am sort of interested in philosophy and ideas, and like expressing those ideas through art, and like so many things, like the idea of Levi, the idea of Cayman, even Sam and Ursula, and the things they go into, and the things they find, and the creatures they find, and like the other people they have to deal with. It is just such an intense, rich experience. Oh my god, I'm just like gonna proclaim how amazing this is. But it's mixture of, the survival epic with science fiction, but with the idea of this planet and plant life and stuff, and the richness of it, and different kind of world. Like if you were going to imagine a whole world, I think the idea of science fiction usually is like, what if it planet but is all desert? And that feels really boring. And as Earth, which is a very rich planet, has all these ecosystems in different places and different temperatures and all these things. This is one of the few times I feel like science fiction is actually dealing with like a planet that feels like how Earth is, where there's so much different plant life and animal life and so many different amazing things going into that whole world, and having those people deal with it. But also like dealing with the idea of like, I'm filming this around Thanksgiving. My kids are hearing about the pilgrims and stuff and problems with that, just watching the Peanuts Pilgrim special, to be honest, and hearing about like how when they were like discovering America, or how you go on voyages back then, this was things that would happen, like people would get stranded, people would die, things like that. And like looking at space in that kind of like basic like kind of way of discovery, and how like people just accept this loss, and how people have to deal with this loss, and how you have to deal with new ecosystems, and will you survive, or will you ruin the ecosystem, or when you mesh with the ecosystem, what does that mean? And it's like I've never seen a science fiction thing do that as well. Like they really came at this in really smart, intelligent kind of science way. It's just quite remarkable. I think this is the great science fiction thing that no one's really talking about, and should. And it is, I hope there's another season. I think with Max and the way streaming is, I have my doubts, unfortunately. I did see it was, in the top 3 of like their most watched shows. So either Max likes it enough to lie to us about it, or it's doing really well. I do think this is a heavy dose of science fiction that is actually pretty easy to go down, but will enrapture you within the world. I do think this is the kind of thing that like I had a hard time putting down and not watching a couple episodes. And even though they released in this strange way of releasing, like I think it was like 3 a week, which felt a little too intense to be honest. I was like, whoa, calm down, show. I still loved it so much. I mean, I fell behind on Loki and other things that I planned on watching, because I was just like, but I want to know what happens. Like, this is going to throw me another loop, and I'm not going to expect what's going to happen. And even if I'd see I wouldn't actually want to see screenshots or anything. I wanted to be surprised by it. So I think this is probably the best show I've seen this year. I think it is just an amazingly surprising show. I have no clue why this wasn't on Adult Swim, and Adult Swim said no, and Max ended up picking up. That doesn't make any sense to me. But I love what Titmouse did with this. I love what Green Street Pictures. I'm really curious what they're going to do, what the creators of this are going to do. I think I've like opened onto a whole new world of really interesting creative people from this that I'm really happy about, and I hope they get to do like so many other different interesting things. And hearing how they are about the creative process is so much different, so interesting. This is a really amazing show, and I think one of the best things I've seen this year. One of the things that I am very happy to have seen this year. It really surprised me and made me think about a lot of different issues and ideas and plant life and the world in ways that like I don't really ever get confronted with in so many different ways like I am with this show. But even if you're like, that seems pretty heavy, I don't know if I'm down with that, it is just a really good show, a show that will surprise you and give you something visually to feast on almost every episode, while having like these rich, complex characters. This is kind of the full scope of almost like what art and science fiction can truly do, and it's all display as you see these people kind of try to survive in Scavengers Reign. So if you have seen Scavengers Reign Season 1 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.